Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the exploration vessel UES Horizon as it drifted through the empty space between star systems. The year was 2387, and humanity had been exploring the galaxy for 50 years since first contact with alien civilizations. Jake had spent most of his adult life among the stars, but today felt different somehow. The usual hum of the ship's engines seemed quieter, and his crew moved with an unusual tension. Communications officer Lisa Barnes turned from her console with a worried expression on her face. She had been monitoring deep space channels when something unexpected came through. The signal was strong and clear, which meant it came from nearby, but no human ships were supposed to be in this region. Lisa's fingers moved quickly over her controls as she tried to identify the source. The main screen flickered to life, showing the image of a tall, alien figure with pale blue skin and large, dark eyes. Jake recognized the species immediately as Zephyrian from the powerful empire that controlled most of the known galaxy. The alien wore elaborate robes that marked him as someone of high rank within their government. Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian High Council began to speak in perfect English, which surprised Jake since most aliens used translation devices. His voice was cold and formal as he delivered a message that would change everything for humanity. The Zephyrians had grown tired of watching human expansion across the galaxy and viewed them as dangerous primitives who had advanced too quickly. The ultimatum was simple and terrifying. Humanity had 30 solar cycles to surrender their independence and submit to imperial rule. Every human colony would be placed under Zephyrian control, and Earth itself would become a subject world. If humanity refused, then the Empire would use its vast military to destroy every human settlement in the galaxy. Jake felt his blood run cold as he listened to the ambassador's words. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled over 3,000 star systems for thousands of years, and no species had ever successfully resisted them. Their technology was far beyond anything humans possessed, and their fleets could destroy entire worlds. Dr. Alan Hughes, who served as the ship's science officer, began analyzing the transmission data while the ambassador continued speaking. What he discovered made the situation even worse. The signal patterns showed that identical messages had been sent to 47 other species over the past 3 centuries. Hughes pulled up historical records and found that none of those civilizations existed anymore. On the frontier world of New Dakota, Colonial Administrator Ben Parker was having his morning coffee when the emergency transmission reached his office. He watched the Zephyrian ambassador deliver the ultimatum with growing anger. Ben had spent 15 years building the colony from nothing, and now aliens were demanding that humans simply give up everything they had worked for. Reports began coming in from the edge of the New Dakota system about strange ships gathering, just beyond sensor range. The Zephyrians were not waiting for humanity's answer. They were already moving their forces into position, confident that humans would surrender like everyone else had done before them. Back on Earth, President Amanda Foster called an emergency session of the United Nations. Leaders from every human world attended the meeting through quantum communication links. The debate was intense but brief. Some argued that resistance was impossible against such a powerful enemy, while others insisted that freedom was worth any price. Foster stood before the assembly and spoke words that would echo through history. She declared that humanity would never bow to tyranny regardless of the odds they faced. Humans had fought for their freedom on Earth for thousands of years, and they would not stop now just because the enemy came from the stars. Emergency broadcasts went out to every human colony, calling for immediate mobilization. Military commanders received orders to begin preparing for war, while civilian leaders started evacuation procedures for non-essential personnel. The message was clear to everyone who heard it. Humanity was going to fight. Jake Morrison felt a mixture of fear and pride as he watched the president's speech. Fear because he knew how powerful the Zephyrian Empire was and how small humanity seemed in comparison. Pride because his species had chosen to stand up for what they believed in, even when facing impossible odds. The communications officer. Lisa Barnes continued monitoring alien transmissions and discovered that news of humanity's defiance was spreading throughout the galaxy. Other subject species were talking about the crazy humans who dared to refuse the Empire's demands. Some seemed shocked, while others appeared hopeful that someone was finally willing to fight back. Dr. Hughes worked frantically to analyze everything they knew about Zephyrian technology and military tactics. He found patterns that suggested the Empire had grown overconfident after centuries of easy victories. Their forces were powerful, but they had never faced an enemy that refused to surrender. Ben Parker stood on the observation deck of New Dakota's main city and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, an alien fleet was preparing to attack his world and destroy everything he had helped build. He thought about his family back on Earth and wondered if he would ever see them again. Then he thought about the children playing in the colony's parks and knew that some things were worth fighting for, no matter what the cost might be. The 30-day countdown had begun, and humanity prepared for the greatest challenge in their history. General Chris Rodriguez had never seen anything like the chaos that erupted across human space after President Foster's declaration. Every military base in the colonies buzzed with activity as soldiers prepared for a war that most experts believed humanity could not win. Chris stood in the command center on Luna Base watching status reports flow in from hundreds of worlds. The numbers were not encouraging. Humanity had perhaps 2,000 military vessels compared to the Zephyrian Empire's estimated 50,000 warships. Human technology was primitive by galactic standards, and their weapons would barely scratch the armor of Imperial battleships. Yet something remarkable was happening as ordinary citizens refused to accept defeat. Engineer Katie Sullivan worked 18-hour shifts at the Titan shipyard's leading teams that transformed civilian vessels into fighting ships. Her innovative, modular weapon systems could turn a simple cargo hauler into a torpedo boat within 3 days. The work was dangerous and exhausting, but Katie pushed herself harder than anyone because she understood what failure would mean. Mining ships became missile platforms, while passenger liners were converted into troop transports. Katie's teams developed simple but effective armor plating that could be welded onto almost any hull. The retrofitted ships would never match Imperial warships, but they gave humanity more options than surrender or annihilation. On Mars, scientist Dr. Alan Hughes made a breakthrough that would change everything. His experiments with quantum entanglement communication created a system that allowed instant coordination across vast distances. The technology was completely unknown to the Zephyrians, who still relied on faster-than-light radio signals that took time to cross space. Hughes worked with military commanders to install quantum communicators on every human ship and base. The network would let scattered forces coordinate attacks and share information in real time. It was humanity's first major technological advantage, and Hughes knew they would need every edge they could get. Captain Jake Morrison found himself. Promoted to admiral as experienced commanders were desperately needed. His ship, the UES Horizon, received experimental weapons and sensors before leading scouting missions into Zephyrian space. The intelligence they gathered was both encouraging and terrifying. Imperial forces relied heavily on automated systems and standard tactics that had worked for centuries. Zephyrian commanders assumed their technological superiority guaranteed victory and rarely bothered with detailed planning. This overconfidence might give human forces opportunities to strike where the enemy least expected it. On agricultural, worlds like New Georgia farmers learned to pilot fighter craft while their children practiced emergency evacuation procedures. The contrast was surreal as people who had spent their lives growing food suddenly found themselves training for space combat, yet they approached the challenge with typical human determination. Intelligence officer Rachel Stone uncovered crucial information about Zephyrian psychology through intercepted communications. The Empire had grown complacent after thousands of years of easy conquests. They viewed warfare as a mere formality before subjugation and had never faced serious resistance from any species. This attitude might work in humanity's favor if they could find ways to surprise and confuse imperial forces. Rachel began developing psychological warfare tactics designed to exploit Zephyrian overconfidence and make them doubt their assumptions about human capabilities. The evacuation of Earth's children became a massive undertaking as underground cities expanded to house millions of young people. Parents made heartbreaking decisions to send their kids to safety while staying behind to fight. The underground facilities were marvels of engineering that could survive orbital bombardment. Ben Parker organized militia forces on New Dakota as reports continued coming in about alien ships massing at the system's edge. Farmers and shopkeepers learned to use military weapons while engineers prepared defensive positions throughout the colony. Everyone understood that New Dakota would likely face attack soon. Katie Sullivan's engineering teams made another breakthrough when they developed portable shield generators that could protect small groups of soldiers. The technology was crude compared to Zephyrian systems, but it gave human infantry a chance against alien weapons. Mass production began immediately at factories across human space. Dr. Hughes expanded his quantum communication network to include automated defense systems that could respond to threats faster than any human operator. The network connected everything from orbital platforms to ground-based missile launchers. Imperial forces would face coordinated resistance unlike anything they had encountered before. Admiral Morrison led training exercises that pushed human crews to their limits as they learned new tactics designed for fighting superior enemies. The exercises emphasized speed and unpredictability over brute force. Human ships would have to hit hard and disappear before Imperial forces could respond. General Rodriguez coordinated with colonial governments to establish supply lines and fallback positions throughout human space. Every world became a potential fortress, while asteroid bases provided hidden staging areas for guerrilla operations. The plan was to make conquest as costly as possible for the Empire. Rachel Stone's intelligence network began recruiting assets among other species under Imperial rule. Many aliens were curious about the humans who dared to resist, and some were willing to share information about Zephyrian military movements. The network grew slowly, but provided valuable intelligence. As the 30-day deadline approached, humanity prepared for war with typical human stubbornness. They knew the odds were against them, but refused to give up without a fight. Children practiced hiding while adults learned to kill. Scientists worked on new weapons while farmers became soldiers. The transformation was remarkable as an entire species mobilized for survival. Humanity had always been good at adapting to challenges, and this would be their greatest test. They faced an enemy with superior technology and vast experience, but humans possessed something the Empire had forgotten about during their long reign: the will to fight for freedom even when victory seemed impossible. The Zephyrians were about to learn what happened when they threatened a species that had never learned how to surrender. The war began without warning when Zephyrian forces attacked the outer colonies 3 days before the ultimatum deadline. Admiral Jake Morrison was reviewing tactical reports when emergency signals flooded the quantum communication network. Kepler, stationed at the edge of human space, was under attack by a massive Imperial fleet. Morrison ordered the UES Horizon and 12 other ships to respond immediately, but he knew they would arrive too late to prevent the station's destruction. The Zephyrians had chosen their target carefully since Kepler Station served as an early warning post that monitored the border regions. Destroying it would blind human defenses. Station Commander Helen Brooks watched Imperial warships emerge from hyperspace like deadly silver clouds. Her small garrison had perhaps 50 fighters and a handful of defensive platforms against 300 enemy vessels. The smart choice would be to evacuate immediately, but Helen had different ideas about what smart meant. She ordered all civilian personnel to the escape pods while her military staff prepared for a final stand. The Zephyrians, sent the usual surrender demand expecting quick compliance, but Helen's response surprised them. She told the Imperial commander exactly what he could do with his surrender offer, using language that would have made a Marine proud. The battle was brief and vicious as human fighters threw themselves against overwhelming odds. Zephyrian plasma. Cannons tore through the small ships, but the pilots kept attacking until their ammunition ran out. They had no hope of victory, but refused to make things easy for the invaders. Helen Brooks made a decision that would become legendary throughout. Human space. Instead of surrendering when her defenses failed, she rigged the entire station as a massive bomb. The fusion reactors were overloaded, while antimatter containment fields were deliberately destabilized. She waited until 3 Imperial cruisers moved close to board the station. The explosion could be seen from neighboring star systems as Kepler Station became a brief new sun. Helen and her crew died instantly, but they took 1,500 Zephyrian soldiers with them, along with 3 capital ships. It was humanity's first victory, and it came at the cost of everything they were trying to protect. News of the sacrifice spread throughout human space via the quantum network. Other commanders began making similar preparations, while civilians understood that this war would be different from anything the galaxy had seen before. Humans were willing to destroy themselves rather than submit to slavery. On New Dakota, Ben Parker received reports that Imperial ground forces were landing outside the main colony. The Zephyrians had learned from Kepler Station and decided to capture this world intact rather than risk another Pyrrhic victory. They deployed shock troops with orders to take prisoners and minimize damage to infrastructure. Parker led the colonial militia in a fighting retreat through the city streets, as alien soldiers advanced with overwhelming firepower. The humans used every dirty trick they could think of, from improvised explosives to sniper attacks from sewers. They turned every building into a fortress and every street corner into an ambush point. The Zephyrian ground commander had expected quick surrender from primitive colonists, but found himself fighting an urban war against an enemy that refused to acknowledge when they were beaten. Human tactics made no sense by Imperial standards, since they focused on causing maximum casualties, rather than preserving their own forces. Children threw grenades from rooftops, while grandmothers operated heavy weapons from basement windows. The colonists fought like cornered animals because that was exactly what they were. Every block cost the invaders dozens of casualties, as humans proved that determination could partially overcome technological disadvantage. Dr. Alan Hughes's quantum communication network proved its worth when scattered human forces across 12 systems received simultaneous attack orders. For the first time in their history, the Zephyrians faced coordinated resistance from multiple locations at once. Imperial commanders found themselves dealing with crisis after crisis. Admiral Morrison arrived at Kepler Station to find nothing but debris and radiation. The sacrifice of Helen Brooks and her crew had delayed the Imperial advance and given other colonies time to prepare. Morrison felt both proud of their courage and angry at the waste of good people. The Battle of the Asteroid Belt began when Katie Sullivan's retrofitted cargo ships engaged the Zephyrian advance fleet. Her converted freighters were no match for Imperial warships in direct combat, but they had other advantages. The cargo ships could hide among asteroids and strike without warning before disappearing again. Sullivan commanded a force of 200 converted vessels against nearly 1,000 Imperial ships. The odds were impossible, but her crews had learned new tactics that confused their enemies. Human ships would emerge from asteroid shadows to fire missiles before vanishing back into the rock fields. The Zephyrian fleet commander grew increasingly frustrated as his powerful warships struggled to target the elusive human vessels. Imperial sensors were designed to track ships in open space, not hunt for enemies hiding among asteroids. The humans used this weakness to deadly effect. After 6 hours of fighting, the Imperial advance fleet withdrew with heavy losses, while Sullivan's forces had lost only 30 ships. It was humanity's first clear tactical victory and proved that superior numbers did not guarantee success. The battle showed that humans could win if they refused to fight by conventional rules. News of the victory spread throughout the galaxy and reached other species under imperial rule. For the first time in centuries, subject races saw that the Zephyrian Empire could be defeated. Rebellion began stirring on distant worlds as hope replaced despair. Ben Parker's militia finally fell. Back to the colony's central district after 3 days of bitter fighting. They had lost half their numbers but inflicted terrible casualties on the invaders. The Zephyrian ground commander requested orbital bombardment rather than continue the costly urban warfare. Imperial fleet commanders hesitated to destroy the colony since they needed intact infrastructure for their occupation forces. This gave Parker's people time to prepare their final surprise. Like Helen Brooks, they had decided that freedom was worth more than survival. The colonial fusion reactor became a weapon as Parker's engineers rigged it for overload. They would deny the Zephyrians their prize even if it meant destroying everything they had built. The countdown began as Imperial forces prepared for their final assault on the government complex. Morrison's fleet arrived just as the explosion lit up New Dakota's sky. Another human colony had chosen death over slavery and taken thousands of enemies with them. The admiral felt a mixture of pride and grief as he watched the mushroom cloud rise above what had been a thriving settlement. The galaxy was learning that humans were unlike any species the Zephyrian Empire had encountered before. They fought, with a ferocity that bordered on madness and preferred mutual destruction to surrender. Imperial commanders began requesting reinforcements as they realized this would not be an easy conquest. The war entered its 3rd month with humanity still fighting despite losing dozens of colonies to Imperial forces. The Zephyrians had expected quick victory but found themselves trapped in a grinding conflict against an enemy that refused to follow normal rules of warfare. Every human world became a fortress that had to be taken at enormous cost. On the industrial world of Foundry Prime factory supervisor Mike Turner led workers in converting manufacturing plants into weapons facilities. The massive factories that had produced consumer goods now churned out simple but effective railguns that human fighters could carry. Turner's people worked around the clock to supply the growing resistance movement. The Zephyrians controlled most of the major colonies, but human forces still held key industrial centers like Foundry Prime. Turner understood that quantity might matter more than quality when facing an enemy with superior technology. His factories could produce 1,000 railguns for every plasma rifle the Empire manufactured. Admiral Jake Morrison had earned a reputation as a tactical genius among both human and alien forces. His unconventional strategies confused Imperial commanders who were trained to fight conventional battles. Morrison specialized in hit-and-run attacks that struck where enemies least expected resistance. The Morrison Doctrine became required reading for human commanders throughout the galaxy. It emphasized speed and unpredictability over firepower while teaching officers to think like guerrillas rather than traditional military leaders. The doctrine turned weakness into strength by avoiding direct confrontation. Commander Sarah Mitchell led the first human deep strike mission into Zephyrian core territory with a small fleet of captured alien vessels. Her ships used Imperial identification codes to penetrate enemy defenses before revealing their true nature. The mission destroyed a major supply depot that supported 3 separate invasion fleets. Mitchell's success proved that humans could operate behind enemy lines using deception and misdirection. Her crews learned to speak basic Zephyrian and understand Imperial protocols well enough to fool casual inspection. The psychological impact was enormous, as Imperial commanders realized nowhere was truly safe. Dr. Lisa Barnes made crucial discoveries about Zephyrian biology while studying captured prisoners and equipment. The aliens lived for centuries, but this longevity came at the cost of reduced adaptability. They struggled to adjust quickly to changing circumstances, unlike humans who excelled at rapid adaptation under pressure. Barnes shared her findings with military planners who began developing tactics that exploited this weakness. Human forces would constantly change their methods to keep Imperial commanders off balance. The aliens' long lifespans actually worked against them when facing an enemy that evolved faster than they could respond. The Zephyrian High Council faced their first serious military setback in over 1,000 years as casualty reports flooded in from the human front. Some council members advocated negotiation, while others demanded complete annihilation of humanity as an example to other potential rebels. The debate grew heated as losses mounted. General Chris Rodriguez coordinated resistance efforts across hundreds of worlds while managing supply lines that stretched across light years. His staff used Dr. Hughes's quantum network to maintain communication with scattered forces and coordinate attacks that appeared random but followed careful planning. D-Day. General's greatest challenge was keeping human morale high despite constant defeats and retreating actions. Rodriguez understood that this was a different kind of war, where losing battles could still advance strategic objectives. Every Imperial victory came at increasing cost as human forces learned from their mistakes. Katie Sullivan's engineering. Teams developed new weapon systems that combined human ingenuity with captured alien technology. Her greatest achievement was the Unity Drive, which allowed faster-than-light travel without the complex infrastructure Imperial ships required. Human vessels could now outmaneuver their enemies. The Unity Drive changed everything about space warfare, as human ships gained mobility advantages that offset their technological disadvantages. Sullivan's teams installed the drives on everything from fighters to cargo haulers, creating a fleet that could strike anywhere without warning. Imperial commanders struggled to predict human movements when enemy forces could appear from any direction, at any time. The Zephyrians had built their strategy around controlling key hyperspace routes, but Unity drives made such control irrelevant. Human ships created their own paths through space. Ben Parker had survived the destruction of New Dakota and now served as a military advisor helping other colonies prepare their defenses. His experience with urban warfare proved valuable as more worlds faced Imperial invasion. Parker taught others how to make every street a battlefield. The lessons from New Dakota spread throughout human space as colonists learned to fight building, by building rather than trying to hold open ground against superior enemies. Cities became mazes of death traps that channeled invaders into carefully prepared killing zones. Rachel Stone's intelligence network expanded to include contacts among other species under Imperial rule. The aliens were fascinated by humans who dared to resist, and some began sharing information about Zephyrian military movements. The network grew slowly but provided increasingly valuable intelligence. Stone discovered that Imperial forces were having supply problems as their long logistics chains came under constant attack from human raiders. The Zephyrians had never faced an enemy that systematically targeted their infrastructure and were unprepared for such warfare. Dr. Hughes made another breakthrough when he successfully captured and analyzed an Imperial communication system. The quantum network expanded to monitor enemy transmissions, giving human forces advance warning of attacks. Knowledge became a weapon as valuable as any gun or missile. The war reached Earth's solar system when a massive Zephyrian fleet arrived to attack humanity's home world. President Amanda Foster refused evacuation and instead coordinated the planet's defense from underground bunkers. The battle for Earth would test everything humans had learned about fighting superior enemies. Admiral Morrison led the space defense while General Rodriguez commanded ground forces preparing for invasion. Every human in the system knew this might be their final battle, but they approached it with typical stubborn determination. Earth would not fall without extracting a terrible price from its attackers. The engagement became known as the Miracle of Earth when human forces supported by alien allies managed to repel the invasion. Imperial casualties were so heavy that Zephyrian commanders began questioning whether conquest of humanity was worth the cost. News of Earth's successful defense spread throughout the galaxy, inspiring other subject species to open rebellion. The Chronari launched their independence movement while the aquatic Thalassians rose from their prison colonies. Even the ancient ethereals began stirring after 5 centuries of defeat. The galactic balance of power was shifting as the Zephyrian Empire faced coordinated resistance for the first time in its history. Humanity had lit a fire that was spreading to every corner of imperial space. The galaxy erupted in rebellion as news of humanity's victories spread to every corner of imperial space. Species that had accepted Zephyrian rule for centuries suddenly remembered what freedom meant and began fighting for their independence. The Empire faced uprisings on hundreds of worlds as their subjects followed humanity's example. The Chronari were the first to openly rebel after learning about human resistance tactics. These reptilian beings had been enslaved for 200 years, but retained their warrior culture in secret. Chronari fighters emerged from hidden bases to attack Imperial installations using weapons they had built in underground factories. General Chris Rodriguez established contact with Chronari military leaders and began sharing human tactical knowledge. The aliens learned quickly and adapted human guerrilla warfare to their own strengths. Chronari natural camouflage abilities made them nearly invisible in jungle environments, where they ambushed Imperial patrols. The aquatic Thalassians rose from their underwater prison colonies in the ocean worlds of the Outer Rim. These peaceful beings had been forced to harvest rare minerals from deep sea trenches, but their knowledge of underwater warfare proved devastating against Zephyrian forces who had never faced such tactics. Admiral Jake Morrison found himself coordinating with alien resistance leaders from dozens of species as the rebellion became a true galactic movement. Each species contributed unique capabilities to the fight while learning from human experience in asymmetric warfare. The diversity of the alliance became its greatest strength. The ancient ethereals shocked everyone when they began stirring after 5 centuries of apparent defeat. These energy beings had been thought completely broken, but human defiance inspired them to remember their own power. Ethereal abilities to disrupt electronic systems proved deadly against the technology-dependent Zephyrian military. Katie Sullivan worked with alien scientists to develop hybrid technologies that combined the best features of multiple civilizations. Human engineering merged with Chronari metallurgy and Thalassian energy systems to create weapons that surpassed anything the Empire possessed. The Unity Drive was just the beginning of their innovations. Dr. Alan Hughes expanded his quantum communication network to include alien systems, creating an unbreakable coordination network that spanned the galaxy. The rebellion transformed from scattered uprisings into a unified force capable of challenging the Empire directly. Information flowed instantly between allied forces. The psychological impact on Zephyrian forces became apparent as Imperial troops began showing signs of doubt and hesitation. They had never faced the possibility of defeat, and many soldiers questioned orders to suppress rebellions that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. Morale collapsed in some units. Commander Sarah Mitchell led joint operations that combined human stealth technology with alien special abilities. Her mixed species teams could infiltrate Imperial facilities and strike targets that had been considered impregnable. The missions proved that cooperation between species could overcome any defense. The liberation of Proxima Fortress marked a turning point in the war when Allied forces captured their first major Imperial stronghold. The fortress had been considered impregnable but fell to a coordinated assault that used every species' unique strengths. Human planning combined with alien execution achieved the impossible. Dr. Lisa Barnes discovered that many Imperial subjects had been secretly helping the rebellion even before open warfare began. Restaurant workers poisoned Zephyrian officials, while maintenance crews sabotaged military equipment. The Empire had been rotting from within as subject species lost faith in Imperial authority. Ben Parker became humanity's chief diplomat, as his experience with different cultures made him ideal for coordinating the diverse alliance. Parker's ability to understand alien perspectives helped forge agreements between species that had ancient grudges against each other. Unity required compromise from everyone. The war reached the throne worlds themselves when Allied fleets began attacking Imperial core territories. These heavily defended systems had never faced invasion, but now found themselves under assault from enemies who fought unlike anything in their experience. The unthinkable was happening as the Empire's heart came under attack: Mike Turner's factories. Foundry Prime became the primary supplier for the entire rebellion, as his production lines manufactured weapons for dozens of species. Turner's workers included humans and aliens working side by side to build the tools of liberation. The sight would have been unimaginable just months earlier. Rachel Stone's intelligence network provided crucial information about Imperial troop movements and supply lines. Her agents included members of nearly every species in the galaxy, as the rebellion gained support from unexpected sources. Even some Zephyrians began questioning their government's policies. The Battle of Nexus Station became legendary when Allied forces destroyed the Empire's primary communication hub. The attack cut Imperial forces off from Central Command and left local commanders operating blindly. Coordinated follow-up strikes hit confused and isolated garrisons throughout the galaxy. Emperor Vexithar himself appeared on galactic broadcasts to address the crisis, but his words only inspired more rebellions. The ancient ruler looked tired and uncertain as he promised reforms that satisfied no one. Subject species no longer believed Imperial promises, while hardcore loyalists thought he showed weakness. Dr. Hughes achieved another breakthrough when he successfully hacked into the Imperial Command Network and began feeding false information to Zephyrian forces. Enemy fleets received orders to attack empty space, while defensive positions were left unguarded. The Empire's own communication system became a weapon against them. The psychological warfare campaign reached new heights when Allied forces began broadcasting human music and literature throughout Imperial space. These cultural works spoke of freedom and resistance in ways that inspired beings across the galaxy. Art became another front in the war for galactic liberation. Katie Sullivan's latest creation was a weapon that could disable entire enemy fleets without destroying them. The device used modified Unity drive technology to create energy fields that shut down Imperial ships without killing their crews. It offered victory without the massive casualties that traditional warfare required. The liberation of the First Throne World sent shockwaves throughout the Empire as forces commanded by Admiral Morrison captured Zephyros Beta. The heavily fortified planet had been considered impregnable but fell to a coordinated assault that combined human tactics with alien abilities. The victory proved that no Imperial stronghold was safe. General Rodriguez coordinated the final push toward the Imperial capital as Allied forces converged on Zephyros Prime from multiple directions. The ancient seat of galactic power had never faced serious attack, but now found itself surrounded by enemies who had learned to fight as one people despite their many differences. The empire that had ruled for millennia was crumbling as subject species everywhere declared independence. The Zephyrian military found itself fighting on hundreds of fronts simultaneously, while their political leadership fractured under pressure. The end was approaching for the oldest tyranny in galactic history. The final assault on Zephyros Prime began with the largest fleet ever assembled in galactic history. Admiral Jake Morrison commanded ships from dozens of species as they approached the Empire's capital world. The ancient planet had never faced serious attack, but now found itself surrounded by enemies who had learned to fight as one unified force. The orbital defenses around Zephyros Prime were legendary for their power and sophistication. Massive battle stations protected the planet, while automated defense networks could destroy entire fleets. Yet these defenses had been designed to fight conventional enemies, not the coordinated rebellion that now approached. Morrison divided his forces into multiple attack groups that struck from different directions simultaneously. Human ships used Unity drives to appear inside the defensive perimeter, while Chronari vessels provided heavy firepower and Thalassian craft jammed enemy communications. The diversity of tactics overwhelmed Imperial defenders. On the planet's surface, General Chris Rodriguez led ground forces through the capital city as they fought toward the Imperial Palace. The urban warfare tactics learned on human colonies proved effective in the ancient streets of Zephyros Prime. Every building became a potential fortress as Allied forces advanced block by block. The Zephyrian defenders fought with desperate courage, as they realized their empire was truly ending. Imperial Guard units made last stands at important buildings, while civilian officials fled deeper into the palace complex. The city that had ruled the galaxy for millennia was falling to former slaves and primitives. Dr. Lisa Barnes led a special team searching for alien prisoners held in the Imperial Palace. Her mission revealed the full extent of Zephyrian atrocities as they discovered torture chambers and execution facilities hidden beneath the grand halls. The Empire's true nature was exposed for all to see. Barnes found thousands of political prisoners from dozens of species who had been held for decades or centuries. Many were leaders of failed rebellions who had been kept alive as examples to discourage resistance. Their liberation became a powerful symbol of the Empire's defeat and the triumph of freedom. Katie Sullivan coordinated the technical aspects of the assault as her engineering teams disabled Imperial defense systems and captured key installations. Her people worked with alien specialists to understand Zephyrian technology and turn it against its creators. The Empire's own weapons became tools of liberation. The space battle reached its climax when Morrison's flagship engaged the Imperial dreadnought that protected the planet. The massive Zephyrian vessel had never been defeated but found itself outmaneuvered by smaller ships that attacked from unexpected angles. Human tactics finally overcame Imperial technology. Emperor Vexthar made his final appearance from the throne room as Allied forces closed in on the palace. The ancient ruler looked tired and defeated as he realized that his empire was truly ending. His words were broadcast throughout the galaxy as he attempted one last appeal for peace. Ben Parker stood before the Zephyrian High Council as humanity's chief diplomat, offering the defeated empire a choice. They could accept equality among species and help build a new galactic order based on freedom and cooperation. The alternative was the same annihilation they had threatened against others. The emotional power of Parker's speech came from his personal experience with Imperial brutality. He had lost his colony and many friends to Zephyrian aggression, but now offered mercy rather than revenge. His words were broadcast throughout the galaxy as an example of human values. Some council members accepted the offer immediately, while others demanded that Zephyrians fight to the death rather than accept defeat. The internal divisions that had weakened the Empire throughout the war finally tore it apart completely. Civil war erupted among the former rulers. Dr. Alan Hughes worked to establish communication networks for the new galactic government as species began negotiating the terms of peace. His quantum communication technology became the foundation for a democratic system that gave every world an equal voice regardless of size or military power. The war officially ended when the last Imperial loyalists surrendered after realizing their cause was hopeless. The Galactic Federation of Free Worlds was established with representatives from every liberated species. Humanity received recognition as liberators rather than conquerors, despite being among the youngest species in the galaxy. Rachel Stone became the first director of the Federal Intelligence Service as former enemies worked together to prevent future tyrannies. Her organization included agents from dozens of species who shared information freely rather than hoarding secrets. Cooperation replaced competition in the new order. The trials of war criminals began immediately as the galaxy sought justice for centuries of oppression. Many Zephyrians cooperated with investigators, while others fled to remote systems hoping to escape punishment. The process was slow but thorough as victims finally received acknowledgement of their suffering. 5 years after the war's end, Admiral Morrison served as Fleet Admiral of the Federation Navy overseeing peacekeeping operations throughout the galaxy. Former Imperial worlds were gradually integrated into the new system while maintaining their cultural identity. The transition was difficult, but peaceful. Dr. Barnes headed the Institute for Interspecies Cooperation, which studied ways to improve understanding between different civilizations. Her research helped prevent conflicts before they could escalate into warfare. The Institute became a model for solving problems through dialogue rather than violence. President Amanda Foster was elected as the Federation's first leader after stepping down from her position on Earth. Her leadership during humanity's darkest hour earned respect from species throughout the galaxy. The former president brought her experience with democracy to galactic government. Katie Sullivan's final engineering triumph was the construction of memorial stations at sites of former atrocities. These monuments used hybrid technology to ensure the galaxy never forgot the cost of tyranny. Each station broadcast the stories of victims while celebrating the courage of those who fought for freedom. The memorial at New Dakota became especially important as it honored both human sacrifice and alien cooperation. Ben Parker spoke at the dedication ceremony explaining how his destroyed colony had become a symbol of resistance that inspired the entire galaxy. General Rodriguez retired to write the official history of the war as younger officers took command of Federation forces. His book became required reading at military academies throughout the galaxy as future leaders learned the importance of fighting for principles rather than conquest. The galaxy had changed completely as former enemies became allies and ancient. Hatreds gave way to cooperation. Children of multiple species played together on worlds that had been battlefields just years before. The future looked brighter than anyone had dared imagine. The final scene took place on New Harmony, a world built jointly by former enemies as a symbol of the new age. Human children played with young Zephyrians while Chronari and Thalassian families shared meals together. The sight would have been impossible during the Empire's reign. As the sun set over New Harmony, an elderly historian recorded the day's events for future generations. She wrote that humanity's greatest victory was not defeating the Empire, but proving that freedom and unity could triumph over tyranny and fear. Sometimes the youngest voice spoke the loudest truth about justice.